Hello, everybody. My name is Madison. I'm the one who sends you emails constantly. So I really appreciate everyone, taking the time this afternoon to be on the call. We have a really exciting community town hall lined up tonight with our one and only Pima County Attorney Laura Conover. And then super exciting, we have Eli Savitt, who is a prosecuting attorney in Michigan. So Ellie and Laura have known each other for quite some time now. So we wanted this to just be kind of an open discussion. Consumer protection is obviously something that's all on all of our minds. But there's really no super strict structure that we want to have tonight. We really want to engage with everyone on the call and just kind of talk about whatever's on your mind. So I'm going to introduce our guests again, and then they can give their remarks, and we'll just get started. So, like I said, we have Eli Savitt here. If you want to do a brief little introduction or whatever feels right, please go ahead.
Sure, absolutely, and it's really great to be here. My name is Eli Savitt. I'm the elected prosecuting attorney in Washtenaw County, Michigan. If you guys were wondering about Laura and I's back and forth about college basketball, that is because Washtenaw County is the home of Ann Arbor, which of course is home of the University of Michigan, which has the number 2 ranked basketball team in the country. I realize you guys are number 1. So I was first elected in 2020, was reelected last year. And importantly, I'm currently a candidate for Michigan Attorney General in 2026. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I anticipate it's just going to be a sort of open, free-flowing conversation. Like was said, fireside chat. Laura and I will be in conversation. But Laura's been just a fantastic colleague. We bounce ideas off each other all the time. And I'm excited to talk about things like the real need for robust consumer protection, especially in the age of AI. Excited to talk about things like voting rights and what state attorneys general can do to fight back against this administration's attacks on our rights and liberties. And I'm excited to just have a conversation and answer your questions. So great to be here. Great to be here always with Laura. Great to meet so many of Laura's friends. So thank you so much for having me here virtually tonight.
Well, Ellie, again, welcome to the Old Pueblo. I feel like your comments were very gracious, which is out of character, as to the uh, ongoing and never-ending rivalry between our two colleges, at least on the basketball court, right? I mean, like, let's be honest. Um, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I think that this could be a really fun conversation. Prepare to get into the weeds a little bit with Ellie and I on fraud, scam, consumer protection, getting corporate money out of politics. That's another favorite between the two of us. And to take your questions, and Eric's going to throw in questions when he feels like it, Madison as well, when you feel like it. But we're here to talk and chat and take your questions, whatever questions might come to mind. And I think we might have a few more people joining us as well down the line tonight, Ellie, and we'll welcome them as they come in. Um, and Eric's already asking questions to the chat or raise hand. So either one. I think we can handle that, Eric, however you want to do it. We'll leave that to your discretion, Eric and Madison. So I just want to say very, very briefly that Ellie and I met, I guess, 5 years ago, virtually, ironically. We have met many times in person now. But we were both elected as our local DAs, if you will, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Tucson, Arizona, during COVID. What a special time that was. And we were both invited into a national network of DAs. And I will be forever grateful for that opportunity. It is in that way that I met Ellie as we launched our careers. And I have been a huge fan of Ellie's work. He's been like a big brother to me. I steal a lot of ideas from him. We have a lot of shared interests, and I look up to him not only because he's like 7'2", but because really, really, and he played college ball, But truly because he's been a thought leader for me on criminal justice reform, on how to focus our limited resources on truly getting at where harm is in our community and focusing on victim and violent crime, and then really digging into root causes of harm, especially when it comes to fraud and scam. Ellie's been out, the network hosted a conference in Tucson, and Ellie's been out to Tucson, same with Ann Arbor. I got to go out there. So Ellie's been out here. Ellie knows how beautiful and vast and special the Old Pueblo is. And Ellie also knows that when I was running for office, we have a number of retirement communities that had just been absolutely targeted and decimated by fraud and scam. It made my blood boil the way zip codes would be targeted on purpose for vulnerable populations, elder populations, sickly populations coming home, back home from the hospital or treatment facilities and being targeted for fraud and scam. And I've looked up to Ellie on all the work that he's done in that realm. Um, Whoever just moved us to the chat room, I love that. I love being able to see everyone who's here with us. So Ellie, let's start. So let's start there. When I was running for office in late 2019 and 2020, in every room I went into, it seemed like, Ellie, somebody had a story of a family member or a friend who'd been the target of a fraud or a scam, and that ended up very unexpectedly becoming kind of a pillar of our platform. I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be a part of it, and it became a huge part of it and trying to reestablish a fraud unit in our office. Ellie, what was your why? Why economic justice, fraud scam, why did this become a big part of who you are and what you stand for?
Yeah, and look, so fundamentally, my belief about the justice system is a very simple one, which is that nobody should be treated differently in the justice system just because of who they are. One of the things that I love about Laura and other DAs that we hang out with is I think that we always need to keep in mind that the stuff that is going on in our courtrooms is potentially the most important and impactful thing that is happening in the lives of the people that are in front of us, whether they are victims, whether they are defendants, or whether they are family members, whether they are witnesses in some circumstances. And, Laura talked about criminal justice reform, which I know is something that's close to both of our hearts, and not treating people unfairly, not being overly punitive, certainly not treating people differentially because of race. But the truth of the matter is, there's a whole category of harm that has consistently gone unaddressed by our justice system. And that includes fraud and scams targeting senior populations and others. It also includes things like consumer violations, right? Predatory businesses that are engaged in deceptive marketing practices and are jacking prices up on us. So when we talk about the justice system as a whole, yes, we need to treat individuals fairly, but it also means that we need to hold accountable those who may be more connected, those who may commit harms through financial means, and make sure that we are protecting the victims of those crimes as well. One of the things about corporate harm and harm that is perpetuated financially is it often gets short shrift in our justice system because it doesn't make the front page of the newspaper or the 6 o'clock news, right? Nobody ever leads off a newscast saying, breaking news at 6 o'clock, somebody got scammed by a family member, or a senior was taken advantage of by a scammer, or a corporation is engaged in wage theft and is not paying workers what they're entitled to. That doesn't make the news, but it doesn't mean that the harm is any less impactful or any less important. And so that's why, one of the things that I tried to do immediately after taking office was build up an economic justice unit that is going to go after exactly this type of stuff. Because when we talk about equality under the law, nobody should be able to avoid accountability for their actions simply because they do it through financial means, simply because they do it through fraud, simply because they do it and perpetuate harm through a corporate form rather than engaging in violence on the street. We need to hold everybody accountable, no matter who they are, no matter how connected they are, no matter how powerful they are, and no matter the means by which they perpetuate their harm.
Well, and so Ellie, I want to take that just a little bit further. I want to talk about Ellie's Economic Justice Unit, which is such a great name. I love it. We just came up with our fraud unit. Simple. We should have had a better name, right? Um, but so I was with Ellie in September in Ann Arbor, and Ellie set up a panel of his fraud prosecutor, a huge federation-wide labor organizer, and you'll give us. I think there was one more in there, Ellie, as well. Maybe your county administrator, but
County commissioner, yeah.
yeah, thank you. And what's so beautiful about being able to share this is that then I came home, gave the whole PowerPoint to our fraud prosecutor, got on the phone with the labor organizer, and the next night we went to the Pima Area Labor Federation to deliver the same lecture and more to wage theft, Ellie, because we've got a lot of work that goes on in our community, a lot of construction, electricians, machinists. We got a lot of that kind of work going out here under the desert sun. And so would you talk just a little bit about the wage theft aspect to the work you guys are doing out in Michigan as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, as I'm running around running for Attorney General, I used to be an eighth grade teacher, so I always give a pop quiz in my sort of standard stump speech. And I ask if anybody knows what the most common form of theft in the United States is. And people say a lot of things. People say identity theft, they say retail fraud, a lot of different guesses. But in fact, it is wage theft, which is
Yep.
employers stealing from their employees. And in fact, if you added up every other form of theft in the United States and the amount that Americans lose to that type of theft, so we're talking every robbery, every pickpocket, identity theft, every time somebody rifles through your car and steals stuff, all that form of theft, and you add the amount that Americans lose due to all that up, the amount that Americans lose each year due to wage theft exceeds all of that combined. Combined. And so this is a real issue that historically we have simply not addressed in our justice system. And part of the reason for that is because often people don't know that they are the victims of wage
Right.
theft, right? I mean, you know if you're the victim of a robbery, you know if your pocket gets picked, you know if something was stolen from your car. But the ways in which wage theft can occur can often be very subtle. It can include things like your boss, if let's say you work hourly and you got to punch in at 8:30 every day, and let's say your boss just says, hey, Laura, you wouldn't mind just coming in a half an hour early before you clock in and just helping me set up for the day. Tomorrow's going to be a really busy day. And you think, okay, this is just a request from my boss, who's being friendly. I'll do it. But no, you are entitled to be paid for that half hour. That is wage theft. Another form of wage theft that you see frequently in the construction industry in particular is misclassification, right? Where employees are misclassified as independent contractors and they get paid in cash and no taxes are taken out, right? But in fact, that's a form of wage theft because when employers do that and they say that their employees are independent contractors, they're off the hook for their share of payroll taxes. And that is an obligation that goes on to the employee. So they're out money. Excuse me. So I said, look, we've got to do something about this. Why would we be sitting here in a county prosecutor's office and basically be ignoring the biggest category of theft in the United States? Because again, whether your pocket is picked on the street, whether stuff is stolen from your car, or whether money that is owed to you is withheld from your paycheck and your employer keeps it for themselves, you're still out money that you are entitled to have for your family. So we built the only economic justice unit, the only unit of its kind in the state of Michigan in a prosecutor's office that focuses specifically on this type of work. And a big part of it was doing community education, working with our local labor unions, pushing out examples of wage theft on social media so people can know that they were victimized and also know they have a place to turn when their employer has been ripping them off. But I think that this is such an important thing to be focused on right now because look, we all know that the crisis that we're living in this country is one of affordability. And DAs, attorneys general, the lawyers, right? We can't make wages go higher, right? We can't force an employer to pay more, to pay a living wage, right? That's not in our jurisdiction. But what we can do is make sure that nobody's getting shorted what they are already owed. We can go after wage theft. We can go after consumer scams and price gouging on the other end to prevent companies from jacking up prices even higher than they should be. And I think this is a really important point for DAs and AGs to be focused on around the country right now, because we all need to do our part and nobody should be taking advantage of the economic pain and the affordability crisis that we have in this country unlawfully.
Amen. And you know, Ellie, you're going to take us kind of into the national stage. This is a perfect segue, but before we go there, I really want to get into the chat. I see Halisi's question, and first, sorry, as a personal point, Halisi, it's really great to see you. And thank you for your question because it's huge. So if you've all seen it, Ellie, we get this constantly where it's like we created our fraud unit with like a dedicated detective of the day to take fraud and scam calls, a local phone number, you know, a page on our website, like a portal where you could report a fraud and scam. Because what we were hearing was it's so hard to even figure out who to report to, which agency might be able to help you. You know, and Halisi's talking about like the person might be in a different state or even a different country. And there's no doubt that you've dealt with this as well. I'll say in my space that one thing we can at least just do is that our detective of the day can put it to our fraud detective, and maybe we can at least do some of this work for you, right? Like time is precious, right? And part of the pain of being a victim of fraud or scam is the loss of time trying to figure it all out and trying to like it's like a rabbit hole and letting us try to do the work for you. And frankly, and Ellie, tell me if you've had this experience, but frankly, I think sometimes a detective who is what we call AZ post certified, right? Like law enforcement calling and a federal agency, right? Or another agency and saying, I'm looking into a report of fraud might carry a heck of a lot more weight or get to a right place faster than, you know, Halisi or a member of our community trying to do it themselves. And Ellie, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Now, I'll just address 2 points from our experience. One is you are absolutely right that when you're talking about something like fraud, when you're talking about consumer abuse, when you're talking about economic harm or wage theft or something like that, people don't know where to turn. Everybody knows what to do if your house gets broken into. You call 911, right? There's no 911 number necessarily for when you've been the victim of financial harm. And it can be civil, it can be criminal, depending on the circumstances. It can be a federal issue, it can be a state issue, right? There's all of these different agencies that enforce it. One of the things that we've tried to build out here in Washtenaw County with our unit, understanding that, is sort of a no wrong door approach. I have some hooks as county prosecutor to go after stuff. The Department of Labor, the federal Department of Labor, has some hooks. Our state Department of Labor and Opportunity has others. For example, I can't enforce workplace safety violations, but we've actually entered into collaborative partnerships with both the federal Department of Labor and our state department, our state equivalent. so that when something comes in, we can information share it, and we sort of create a no wrong door approach. If something comes in from the state level that really should be handled locally, they give it to us. If something comes into our office that there's only a federal hook on it, which happens sometimes, maybe it's, what we can get them on is a tax issue, then we give it to the feds. So, I think that's the best model if you're able to build partnerships out, because it means that no matter who an individual is calling, it will ultimately get to the right place. Then the other thing Laura mentioned, which I think is right, and it demonstrates the importance in this space, is just like the power of having law enforcement, prosecutors involved in this. Because I can tell you, not every case that we take in our economic justice unit, for example, goes to litigation. In fact, very few of them do. And in part, that's because a lot of times victims don't really particularly want to sit in court for 3 years and testify against their employer, or go through the whole process of litigation. They just want their money back. And what we've been able to do, actually, in a lot of circumstances, with the victim's blessing, and in fact, the victim encouraged us to do this, we will sometimes just send out a letter and say, hey, we've heard you are doing this, right? And you should stop. And in a lot of cases, including, frankly, some that crossed like county lines, and I probably didn't really have jurisdiction, we'd get letters back that says, we categorically deny doing anything wrong. Also, we've paid back the money and we've stopped doing it. Fair enough, right? And if you can do it that way, honestly, so much the better, right? I mean, we're lawyers. We like being in court. We like the victory of, when a judge renders a verdict, or a jury does. But really, for the people that are involved, if you can just send a letter, right, and they can get their money back, or the bad acts can stop, so much the better. It's much more efficient that way. And it saves, you mentioned the time. It saves a lot of the time of having to go through a court process and wait and be anxious and say, like, can I count on this money coming back into my pocket this year, or not? So having law enforcement involved, because of the power of the badge, the power of the letterhead, what have you, I think is really important in this context, and also sends a message when you're sending out letters like that. When you have a detective that's working these cases, there's a deterrence aspect to this too, because when companies know that
Yes.
somebody's actually looking into this, they're no longer going to be building it into their business model, because they're going to be afraid of getting caught.
Thank you. Yeah, important point. If you don't mind, I want to call on Nathan, who has his hand up. Go ahead, Nathan.
Thanks, Madison.
Thanks. So my question is related to this, but kind of tangentially. So I was wondering if you guys can talk about how you are trying to reassure people who have been victims of wage theft or other issues like that, but who may have a family member who is undocumented and is really concerned about going to law enforcement at all for fear that their information will come out.
Yeah, and I was wondering if how much that's touched on you, Ellie. One of the things we were really pushing out with the Pima Area Labor Federation, Nathan, or PALF, is that the hopes that these labor leaders can be like a safe intermediary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that works really, really well with LA. Like any worker can be worried that reporting harm just means they lose their job, right? And that's terrible. And so that fear acts as an obstacle, right? But labor leaders can be an intermediary, right? Like they can gather the complaint and then present the complaint and allow maybe some investigation to go on. That works similarly with the separate or dual fear, both, right? That I could lose my job and I may not have firm immigration status, or I have an immediate family member who doesn't. I'm a mixed status household. Again, labor leaders can be huge in that, and that's why we went and did kind of a huge training on that again with a lot of assistance from LA's team, which I so appreciated. The other thing, Nathan, I want to point out is that 88 crime Ellie, 88 Crime is this division of our office. It had Crime Stoppers. It has different names in different places, but it's anonymous crime reporting, and it's actually a division of our office. And that addresses so many different kinds of fear of like, I need to report a crime, but it's my neighbor and they live next door. I'm afraid, and we've made sure that we run it completely bilingually, right? And so we've put it out there that because people may have all kinds of fear, and the ability to report crime anonymously is huge, and it's so modern now too. And I can get into the weeds on that. So I mean, it's pretty fascinating, but the ability to be able to safely and anonymously report crime and bilingually is profound. And Ellie, I don't know if you want to add, where Ellie is in Detroit and Ann Arbor, and I think we should get into nationwide politics sooner than later. But Ellie's dealing with, and us too, right, Nathan? But Ellie's got huge populations of that are multilingual in his area of the country. And so, Ellie, you want to mention something about that?
Yeah, Laura really did a great job explaining how labor leaders can be intermediaries, and can look. Frequently, the harm is going on by competitors to organized labor. Right? They're engaged in wage theft, misclassification, frequently labor trafficking, and these companies are doing so in a way that undercuts good labor union companies that are playing by the rules, right? Because they look, if you're labor trafficking people, right, you're paying them sub minimum wage. You can charge a lot less for really substandard work as well. So we've had labor unions will sometimes do investigations. They'll hear about stuff on job sites, especially in the trades, bring it to our attention. But I really want to be candid about this too, because there's other things that we at least in our office, can do to try to provide some sense of safety to the victims of these crimes, to people that may have been labor trafficked, for folks whose immigration status are being held over their heads by a shady employer. One of the things that is available there, and it's available nationwide, even under the Trump administration, is T visas, which are special visas that provide legal status in this country and potentially a pathway even to citizenship down the line to victims of trafficking. And it's meant to allow trafficking victims, labor or sex trafficking, to come forward, not to have that threat of deportation be used against them, because so frequently that is why you're unable to prove trafficking cases, both in the sex and labor context, right? So we freely certified those, right? And we've made this clear. We've worked with community partners. We've gotten the information out there in multiple languages, as Laura said. But I got to be honest, there's still just such a climate of fear out there. Right?
Yeah.
We can do everything we can at the local level, but with what's happening nationally, with people seeing masked men snatch their neighbors, their family members, folks that look like them off the street, they are not coming forward. And if there is a case, they are going 3 sheets to the wind. And that's true not just in the types of cases that we're talking about here involving economic harm, though it is true there. It's also true in your more run-of-the-mill criminal cases. I'm sure Laura has seen this too, but we've seen a profound increase in victims of crime that are non-citizens not showing up to court to testify against the person that harmed them. And that is because they are more afraid of the government, understandably, than they are of the person that imposed very real harm upon them. That's a really unacceptable situation for public safety. I don't care what your political ideology is. When you are unable to prosecute cases because victims are afraid to show up to court because they're afraid of their government, that is a failure at our federal government level. It just is. And by the way, I say this in Washtenaw County, where our sheriff's office does not collaborate with ICE. We have nothing to do with ICE, right? We've made that clear. We've been public about it. And they still don't show up to court. So maybe this is a segue into the national conversation, because I know this is stuff that law enforcement and prosecutors are dealing with around the country. And by the way, I just want to put one last exclamation point on this. I talk about this, and Laura can talk about this, about victims not showing up to court, witnesses not showing up to court, right? That is the tip of the iceberg, because those are the cases that we know about. Far more worrisome are the cases that are never reported in the first place, where a victim does not call for help because, again, they are more afraid of the government than the person who is actively in that moment causing them harm. It's unacceptable risk to public safety.
Ellie, I couldn't agree with you more. And when this all started, I said this is just going to be a huge threat to public safety, because when you tell half our community, right, it's half, it's at least half, because everyone has a loved one, who's in like a mixed status situation in their home. It's not just the people who have no status, it's the people with vulnerable status, or the people who love a person with no status, etc. If you send a message of fear to half our community, that's not good for public safety. And I'll tell you that what's in the public record is that we had a homicide case, fall apart because the only eyewitness was from El Salvador, and we don't know where he is. We have no idea what happened, but he's not here with us, and he's not available anymore. And he's this solo eyewitness to a homicide. There are very real consequences to this. Ellie, what I want to do is I want to say that there is a really great question in the chat that's very timely and on trend here in Tucson and in Arizona about data centers. And I want to give you just a second, because I just don't know if that's an issue in Michigan yet, or coming at a corner near you soon. I love a letter to the editor that I saw, God, a year ago, that said, I was raised in Ireland, and I don't know why this woman's here now, but it was in our local paper saying, not even Ireland had enough water for data centers, right? And we're Ireland. So I'll give you a moment to ponder and let us know whether that's an issue for you. But we have other questions in the chat that, and I'll ask Madison or Eric where you want to go next with that while Ellie gives some thought.
Okay. Yeah, great. So Aaron asks, is wage theft considered a subset of a white collar crime? Yeah, basically we keep it there.
It's a great question, actually. I've never really actually considered that. It's certainly a subset of like corporate crime or crime perpetuated by a business. I think when we think of white collar crime, we're thinking more of like, people on Wall Street that are, engaged in shady financial transactions, screwing over investors and the like we saw with the subprime crisis, which of course screwed over not just investors, but resulted in the foreclosure of millions of houses and housing instability for so many people, and of course the collapse of the global economy. Wage theft, of course, can occur that way, right? I mean, there's been examples of major corporations engaged in wage theft and misclassification, right? Particularly in the gig economy, when you're talking about things like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and those types of services. There's been potential issues of tip theft, misclassification, all of that stuff. So some of that does come from like the corporate C-suite when they're setting policies for a Fortune 500 company. But frankly, a lot of times wage theft is perpetuated, and this is the honest reality, by your smaller businesses too, that are cutting corners, are trying to undercut the businesses that are playing by the rules. And I think people think about that a little bit less as white collar crime. But I don't know. I don't know, Laura, if you have thoughts on that. It's something I'd never really considered.
Yeah, I think, right. I mean, I think the question is like how organized, I guess, how organized it is or not. Unfortunately, it can be more just like colleague to colleague, supervisor to subordinate, which again, causes that fear of retaliation, fear of losing your job. But Aaron, it's a really fascinating question. And I guess I would just say that the harm shakes out the same, right? If 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 a small bank implodes because of bad actors on Wall Street, that's one thing. But what I always say is what we try to hold in our local office, right? That maybe the AG's office or the feds don't have time or interest in is that even a $300 loss can impact your ability to pay rent that month, right? And that's huge loss and huge harm in our minds, right? If you suddenly can't, if you get shorted unlawfully and wrongly, and you suddenly aren't sure about paying rent, or you're making choices between rent and diapers and medicine, and that's kind of what calls to me, and I think Ellie and the people we know. That's big harm in our minds.
Mhm.
Well,
Um,
one thing I just also want to highlight, and Laura, you touched on this a little bit too, is there's sort of a spectrum, at least in my mind, that we've found in terms of um, the intentionality of wage theft. Because sometimes it's just major corporations who are intentionally flouting the rules. Or, for example, like in the service industry sphere, right? You go up to the checkout counter and it's got one of the electronic things that says, tips. And we've had cases like this. The people behind the counter, the workers will say, "Don't press that, don't tip us," because it goes straight to the boss. Now everybody knows. I mean, that's just stealing, right? But then it can also be actually a little bit more subtle, and I believe in some cases not intentional. I'll give you an example of this again in the service industry. We've had a case of managers in the tip pool, right? Which managers cannot be in the tip pool. If you're a salaried employee, you cannot be in the tip pool. But you also have some small shops, right? That the manager is waiting tables. They're not super up on the law. They don't have access to like labor lawyers or anything like that, right? They're trying to make ends meet. And the manager who did the shift waiting tables to fill in for somebody else, they think, okay, well, I'm entitled to the money that was left on the table, right? And I think that can be like they're not. I want to be clear about this. They're not. It's illegal. But just like anything else in our justice system, there's shades of gray, right? Especially in terms of the intentionality behind it. And in cases like that, when we've gotten them, we send those letters, and if they say, and it's plausible, like, we really did not know this, we'll pay the money back and we're going to stop doing this. You can say, okay, right? We've addressed the harm. There's no need to like go after you or publicize these bad acts. So I want to. Everything is nuanced in this world, right?
Yeah.
And in response, like the white collar crime, I think white collar crime carries, at least to me, a connotation of having much more intentionality behind it than what you sometimes see in the wage theft sphere.
Mhm.
Well, and I thought you were going to say skimming off of the tip pool, but
Yeah, well,
because we've dealt with that here, and sometimes like enough, employees will leave together and move on, and then they have the courage to like report,
yeah.
right? So we've seen that, we've seen that.
Eric, if
Um,
you have anything, feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, Madison.
Yeah, I can't resist. I am going to say this because this is this is boiling in my head that this term white collar crime like is literally low key triggering. It is an inherently classist language. It's steeped in legacy racism, blue blood stratification, the justification for entrenched interests to lighten their own penalties while keeping Leos focused on the scary pores and violent crime. And it's a completely bullshit notion. I find it offensive. But that's just my take. But thank you for letting me say that.
Great. And
Love it.
Aaron, where's there? In no means, Aaron, is that a comment about your question? It's just, your
No, no,
question was
no, not
great,
in the
but yeah,
slightest.
but
Not in the
right.
slightest. Yeah, no, it's
We
very much. I think he was more in alignment with that. I think you both are.
yes,
But that,
yes,
like, for
yes,
me, it's
yes.
that's where, yeah, I don't think
We lo
I didn't take it that way at all. Yeah, please.
we
Thank
love
you.
we love it. I love the question, and Eric, I love your comment. That's so amazing. So Ellie, so guys, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we were hitting on is that is the ultimate question of other than, that Ellie and I get to be in this network together, we get to share ideas, steal from each other. There's 30 of us across the nation. Thank heavens. I don't know how I would have done this without them. Um, other than that, our idea was that, as much as I love Ellie being in our network, and I'm not trying to complain that he's trying to leave our network, but he's hopefully our next Michigan Attorney General. And what I love, you're in a room, Ellie, you're in a room of like highly educated, highly involved, like highly researched. I'm just telling you what I know about looking around the names in here. Highly involved, highly invested in the U.S. and in democracy and in the rule of law and the survival of democracy. And I love how you put it to me the other night, about how important the Attorney General might be in Michigan in 2028 in a way that is probably super predictable. And Ellie, just know that I can't possibly speak for this whole room. So I'll only speak for myself and we'll see how they react. But I believe I have experienced great relief and so much gratitude. And I'm so impressed with our Attorney General who's come in, Chris Mays, and having her in office to protect us, to protect the rule of law, to stand up very bravely and sometimes very colorfully against President Trump. I think we're lucky to have someone who's taken it on like that. Sometimes, it's popular and sometimes it's not. And that's the role that Ellie is looking to move into as the Michigan Attorney General. And so Ellie, just thinking ahead about what the scheme might look like nationwide and how Michigan may be critical the way Arizona's critical, right? We're swing states.
Yeah. So let me say this, because I too am incredibly grateful that Chris Mays is the Attorney General of Arizona, right? And that's true for a couple reasons, given the national everything right now. One is that I believe that state attorneys general are some of the most important actors in the national political sphere today, because
Yeah.
we are seeing the Trump administration break the law daily. Congress, this Republican Congress, has proved unwilling to stop them. We have recourse to the courts potentially, but very frequently it is only a state attorney general that has standing to sue the federal government on behalf of the people of their state. And you've seen Democratic AGs join together. Frequently, they divide up who the lead is, right? Depending sometimes on, look, the fact that like there's workforce constraints too, right? Like the same AG's office can't be writing every single one of their complaints, but also depending on the facts on the ground, right? You want the state with the strongest facts as to how this is impacting their communities in a lot of circumstances to be the lead plaintiff, to be the one that can demonstrate that they have standing to sue in federal court. So it matters dramatically for me in Michigan that Chris Mays is the AG in Arizona. And then we have other Democratic AGs across the country, because it is only through these coalitions that some of these unlawful actions have actually been checked. And I do want to emphasize this too, because look, the Supreme Court right now is horrible. We all know that. And the Trump administration, until the other day, thankfully, was on a huge winning streak in the U.S. Supreme Court. And I say thankfully because they issued the ruling that they cannot just send the military to the streets of Chicago. But before that, I think they'd won like 18 cases in the U.S. Supreme Court. And you might say, like, well, do these lawsuits actually do anything? Those are only the cases that go to the U.S. Supreme Court. In Michigan alone, as a result of these efforts among state AGs, we have recovered $2 billion that would have otherwise been cut for our communities as a result of AG-driven litigation, which again only happens because of this banding together by Democratic AGs to fight back against the Trump administration. So it matters who the AG in Arizona is to somebody in Michigan. I think it matters who the AG in Michigan is to somebody in Arizona. And the other thing I want to emphasize is this. The next Attorney General of Michigan, whoever wins this election that I'm running in 2026, is going to be the Attorney General who is Attorney General on election night in 2028.
Yep.
And we know what is coming.
Yep.
There will be efforts by the Republican Party to disenfranchise voters in Detroit, to stop counting ballots from majority-minority areas in Michigan that vote predominantly Democratic. We saw this in 2020. It is coming in 2028. And the reason we have to care about who the AG of every state is because that Attorney General can either fight back against those efforts in court, or if they're on the wrong side of it, can accede to it. And that's
nothing.
Literally the difference for the 2028 election is who's the AG in Arizona and who's the AG in Michigan, right? And who's the AG in Pennsylvania and other swing states as well. So this is an issue of national importance, and it is one of the main reasons I am running. Just, a little bit about my background. Before I was a prosecutor, I actually did civil rights and public interest work. I've done voting rights cases with the ACLU of Michigan, so I have that experience. I started my legal career clerking for the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the United States Supreme Court, so I know the Supreme Court process. And I think that really anybody who's running for AG in a swing state right now should really have a strong grasp and a good idea of how they're going to fight back against these efforts in 2028 to disenfranchise voters and to undermine free, fair, and final elections in a presidential year.
Ellie, you really put that together like really succinctly, and I really appreciate that. And what you're causing is all of us to remember who our previous Attorney General was, which was my first 2 years in office, and all that entailed, which meant that I had to carry the reproductive health litigation for the state against that Attorney General until Chris Mays came into office. Then she reverses course and joins my litigation. Talk about, real consequences of elections that everybody can feel statewide. And Ellie, Ellie, I think that I have this weird thing, this weird construct under Arizona law and the Arizona Constitution, that I'm not only the DA, but I'm also the county's attorney. And so I have the ability to join litigation that Chris Mays is running, but also to carry my own litigation against the federal government. I think I'm on number 5. I think so my office under my name for the 5th time has now sued the federal government to get funding turned back on for public health, transportation, and housing, to get an invoice paid to the tune of $10 million from the Department of Homeland Security. And then they stole a murder suspect. That's a funny story for another time. And we won all 5 cases. And it is wild that it's the attorneys, I think, in local DA offices and the Attorney General's offices that are like the first responders to attacks on the Constitution and the rule of law and democracy itself. And I think Jasmine Crockett said that.
Yeah.
I don't know, I meant to capture it. But in testimony last week on the floor of Congress, she said, "I think it's going to be the local DAs that are going to have to save us." And I was like, "Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We're trying."
Well, thank you both for everything you're doing in the community, because obviously, it impacts, nationwide. So we are definitely supporting you from over here, Ellie, and I hope everyone on this call will consider that as well. We're going to get up some slides here really quick. If you do feel like supporting Ellie's campaign, I highly encourage that. And then we also have our county attorney, Laura Conover. A lot of you have probably already subscribed, but she does her Sunday Night Thoughts, which is just a really insightful, notes from the week from Laura. So we'll get some information up here if you guys want to subscribe to that as well.
I am subscribed to that, I will note. So, and I look forward to it.
Good one. It's not like your traditional, copy paste newsletter. It's like I said, it's really insightful, easy to read.
Oh, that's very sweet. That's very kind, you guys. Yeah, I love how Ellie put it about how there's going to be 5 or 6 key attorneys general. Ellie got it right all night. Attorneys general is the plural. Truly, Arizona, Michigan, I don't Florida, Georgia. We could name who we think the 5 are that are going to be sitting at their desk for election 2028. And we need people we trust and know uh, who are going to put democracy and America first above corporate interests and allegiance and Trump loyalties. I don't know what else, right?
Yeah, all those things.
All
And
those
and
things.
look, then hopefully we win in 2028 too, and we can start
Right, that's
rebuilding.
right.
I mean, because that's the other thing, right? We are going to be at an inflection point in 2028. But it's also going to be important for state AGs to be helping to defend some of what hopefully the next Democratic administration will have to be doing to undo some of this chaos that's happened at the federal level. It's important when the federal government, I can tell you, has the support of states in court, especially when you're getting up to the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court level.
I want to mention that we did not get to the data center question, and Derek. I am very aware of that. It's very possible that that's not a top of mind issue in Michigan right now. But
That would be
let's.
wrong, Laura. It is.
Oh,
Look, we're the Great Lakes state. We have 90% of the nation's
touche.
fresh water. So water use and water conservation is incredibly important to us here in Michigan. And the abundance of water has made Michigan a place where they are seeking to expand data centers. And look, I will tell you my view on the things. Uh, we are seeing a rush to build these data centers, and we have seen in other communities, just as a result of the slipshod job that is done when you're trying to get these built very quickly, real harms on communities as a result. And the one case I'll mention out of Tennessee was South Memphis, where Elon Musk built data centers and a bunch of gas turbines to power them. And they were unregulated, unpermitted, and in the area that was already one of the most polluted zip codes in the entire country, predominantly minority. And I mean, these impose real harms on people. We're talking about asthma, we're talking about leukemia, we're talking about kids missing school because they can't breathe. So when you're building these things in an irresponsible way, it imposes real harms on the community. That's to say nothing of water resources. That's to say nothing of increased electrical bills for consumers potentially. And my perspective on the data centers is, we are not going to put the genie back in the bottle. I just want to be honest about that. But if you're going to be building them, you better be building them in an environmentally sustainable manner. You better be building them in a way that doesn't pass utility costs along to consumers. And you better be building them in a way that protects environmental justice. And what we've seen a lot here in Michigan, at least, is a lack of transparency about how exactly those parameters are going to be met. And to me, that's really disturbing.
All right, well, we are wrapping up here. I want to say thank you again to everyone who took the time. I know it's like this weird holiday in between seasons, so today feels like a Sunday to me. So thank you all for getting on this call and informing yourself and just being a part of this conversation. Of course, we'll continue to support our Pima County Attorney, Laura Conover. Like I mentioned, I really encourage you guys to learn even more about Eli and support his campaign as well, because we even need him over in Arizona to win in Michigan. So you can check out all the links and everything in the chat, and I'll send an email to everyone who attended tonight. But thank you again. And if anyone has any closing thoughts, feel free to just unmute yourself or have a great night.
Thank you, Madison.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. A huge thank you to Madison, Alex, and Eric for making this happen, to the Pima County Democratic Party. I can't thank you enough. Ellie, thank you for entertaining this idea. It's so great to be with all of you who care this much about all of the issues, and let's keep the conversation going. So lovely to see you all.
Yes, I'm going to stay on till the very end so people can still access the chat. But yes, please have a great night and keep coming to our virtual events. We're going to have plenty more, and I'll see you around. Thank you.
And I just really want to echo thank you for this opportunity. Thanks, Laura, for always being a great friend, great partner in justice and being in conversation with me. And thanks to everybody at the Pima County Dems for putting this on, and for everybody here that spent, an evening during like the holiday season to talk about these really important issues. Y'all are great, and hopefully I can be back out in Tucson sometime soon and maybe meet some of you in person.
Thank you, Ellie. We're really happy to have you.
Thanks so much,
Amen.
Ellie.